Welcome to the Reggie McNeil Podcast, where we explore what it means to seek God's kingdom here on earth. Join us on our journey to become more aware of and encouraged by God's work in and around us. In this series, we're looking at how we can live as viral kingdom agents, both in our personal lives as well as in our spheres of influence. This episode focuses on the leadership qualities and practices required for leading a kingdom movement. Many of you listening to the podcast are leaders, either in the church or in your business or vocation. Particularly those who are in the church as institution world will find Reggie's comments helpful for leading the church to become more kingdom-centric. Even if you don't have a specific leadership role, you will find these insights beneficial, because all of us have spheres of influence, our families, our friends, our neighbors. The kingdom of God is a movement that impacts every sector of society and domain of human endeavor. All of us who are Jesus followers are commissioned to extend his mission to live as viral kingdom agents where we play, live, work, go to school, wherever we hang out. We are called by God to lead in the kingdom movement. So Reggie, how do we get started?
Well, first of all, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate for going first. Don't wait on everyone else to get it. For you to take whatever steps. I mean, be that volunteer at the food bank. Go to the school and offer your services as a volunteer. Figure out how to have that neighbor over or take them something to express some goodwill to them. In other words, I think it's critical that we take first steps. This is part of what it means to seek first. I mean, that's an action. That's, get into it. Go for it. And quite honestly, I remember some years ago I was doing a church consult, and this particular congregation was in an affluent area and was attended by people who were affluent, and they would say, "Well, we just don't have so many needs in our community, and the people in our community don't have those needs." And I stopped them right there. I said, "Wait a minute. I can tell you that the biggest need that the folks that are affluent have is their anxiety and their need to serve other people. So if you can become a channel for helping them actually know what it is to help other human beings have a better life on this planet, you'll be doing them a huge service, and you'll be doing yourself a huge service as well. So even as a congregation, don't wait for other congregations. Don't wait for, just go first. But the second thing I would say is just don't go alone. Now, that may sound contradictory, but I'm just trying to tell you, take somebody with you. I mean, in this situation, let's just say it's something I don't want to do, it's something Hannah doesn't want to do. Come on, let's do it together. And then, we're more likely to get that done. And so it's way better, to have folks around you. Turn it into a party. Enjoy the company of some other folks while you work with something that may be a challenge to you. So go first, but don't go alone.
So what are some specific observations or insights for our listeners who are church leaders?
I think it's important when you find people doing whatever it is that you believe to be, kingdom work, and that's a huge range of human activity there. Make heroes of the people that are doing it. I think so often, again, back to this church-centric world, we celebrate the gifts and the talents that it takes to pull a church service off. So, we'll always comment on folks' ability to sing or their ability to teach or to ush or to deke or whatever, or fix food for us. But, I mean, we need to celebrate the wide range of gifts and talents that people bring to their life, where they're actually helping other people, either through their profession or just as good people, or a mom with her kids. It doesn't even have to be something beyond the home for that matter, but it starts there. So the point being is make heroes of these folks. I can remember I was working with a vestry of a congregation, not a huge congregation, but a congregation that was doing some significant work, because it's in my world anymore, it's not about the size of the gathering on Sunday, it's about the size of the vision and the impact that people have for making a difference in their community. And so this particular congregation had decided they would work with middle schoolers. My goodness, middle schoolers. I mean, these aren't even people, right? And so, I mean, it's one thing to work with a first grader if they're cute and all that, and I recommend it. But middle school is a challenging area. But they had decided, because they had a couple of teachers in their congregation. By the way, that should teach us something right there. Where has God already deployed us? Let's help those folks be kingdom agents. But anyway, so they were going to work this. So anyways, I was with them when they launched this mentoring program that one of their church members, who was a science and math teacher, was going to help coordinate in the school there. I was back a year later. I asked how that was going. They told me the number of people that were engaged in it, and thankfully all of the early adopters seemed to be on board. And then, and then the rector said, Frank's a great example. Frank was seated to my right. And I said, how so? She said, well, Frank started mentoring a kid who had failed 8th grade, helped him pass 8th grade, and now he's knocking the ball out of the park in 9th grade. And I'm looking at Frank and say, Frank, what did you do? And he's shaking his head, and he doesn't want to own up to it. So I finally coach him out, I just have breakfast with this kid every Monday morning, make sure he has what he needs for school and all that. And so I said, Frank, what you're doing is changing this kid's life. You're changing the whole trajectory of his life. By now, Frank's sitting there, his big old tears coming down his cheek, and he said, no, what this kid's doing for me is way more than I'm doing for him. And, now, by the way, I haven't mentioned to you yet, Frank was in his mid-70s, and he was having the time of his life and finding great fulfillment. And so, I mean, you make a hero out of Frank by telling that story. Suddenly, by the way, you've got a whole bunch of other people that have just been exposed to the kingdom virus, and they're going, whoa, give me some of that. So I think that would be one of the things that I would say to folks: make heroes of the right people. I would also say, be prepared for not everyone to like the direction you're going in. I mean, this will be a shock to you, right? Jesus said they will love you just like they love me. It seems that I remember it was a little different from that. Because religious people are who want it all to be religion, so they can check the boxes and win at that game. When you start out talking about living sacrificially and loving other people and all that kind of stuff, you're going to find pushback from folks whose entire life has been built around a church-centric religion as institution kind of world. They're going to want to keep the old scorecard because they know how to win with that scorecard, and they are, they're champs in that. But they may not be champs at empathy and compassion and sharing and serving and all that stuff that Jesus talked about. So just be prepared that you're going to get some pushback. And so if I were you, as I deal with all of my clients, I would say you better, educate yourself on managing change and transition, and particularly how you encounter resistance, and move people from denial and resistance over into exploration and commitment. It is a process, and it takes great leadership skills to do it. Those are competencies that you need to have in your backpack. And I encourage you to quit listening to this podcast right now and go start building those competencies into your life.
So, Reggie, this is a question for all of us who want to help others live the life God intends for them. How do we know where to put our energies and resources, and especially for those people who are struggling to find the needs of their community? How can they identify those?
There are a couple things that I always ask people to pay attention to because your question is exactly right. A lot of folks say, I want to help, but where, how, what? And so I say, first of all, pay attention to the stuff that actually grabs your attention. If it's something that comes up and your heart beats a little faster, or you lean in or say, turn the volume up on the TV so I can listen to that story, or it comes up at night and everybody else is ready to go to bed, but suddenly you're energized. You lay in bed thinking about that stuff. There's a reason that you are drawn to certain things and certain situations, certain scenarios. I would really pay attention to that. I would not disregard that, because I think this is a key way the Spirit moves. A second thing that I tell people to look for is pay attention to what breaks your heart. It's a little different from, it may be the same, but it can be different from just what gets your attention. There are other things that literally and sometimes just cause our hearts to just hurt within us. And I remember I was talking about this in a workshop out in California, and a woman came to me. In fact, I had folks turn to each other and say, "What is it that breaks your heart?" And this lady who was sitting on the front row, she approached me during that time, and she said, "You know what breaks my heart?" And I said, "No," thinking, I mean, this is an elderly lady. I was thinking I'm fixing to hear a life of wisdom here. I was very interested. She said, "What breaks my heart is that nothing breaks my heart." I mean, she had come to realize in those moments, and she went ahead to explain that to me. She says, "I see the same people all the time. I'm in a rut. I go from my house to the hairdresser to the church to the club to the she told me all the places in a week. She says I don't pay attention to the needs and the hurts of people around me. In fact, she says I've worked really hard to insulate myself against all of that pain, and it occurs to me." That I think a lot of people in church, they think that's the American dream. The American dream is just to be without pain and suffering. No, actually, God, the Bible is a book about how your heart gets broken, and you move on it to actually move toward helping other folks. And so I think, I would. Those are some things. Now, Hannah, your generation, particularly, when I spend time with 20-somethings and even young 30s. I always encourage your generation, folks your age, to keep expanding your exposure to stuff. I mean, it may not even be interesting or break your heart, but try to have as wide a range of engagement across things, because that's how you're going to know. I mean, that gives stuff more chance, for you to find that out, because you're not going to find it out trolling around online or sitting around. I mean, you got to be engaged at something. What bothers me, and so it doesn't really. I mean, when someone your age or a little older says, "I don't know what to do," that's okay. I mean, that's normal. But what's interesting is I find folks in their 50s and 60s that still can't figure it out, where they are trying to make a dent on planet Earth, and I just think that's profoundly sad.
And I think going off of that, it's also important to listen to what breaks other people's hearts, because I think sometimes you don't realize that things are an issue, or that you're so insulated in yourself that you don't recognize some of the issues that other people are facing. And I think it's important to open your mind to other people's problems.
So in effect, they're tutoring you in what to be paying. I thought, well, that's a great insight. I think I'll add that to my presentation. That's good. You're exactly right.
So, do you have any other advice for us as we strive to become kingdom leaders in our spheres of influence?
Yeah, be patient. I mean, this podcast is designed to make you miserable and get out there and do something, for crying out loud. Hurry up. But the truth is, give yourself a little patience, and give the people around you patience. I'm around leaders all the time that talk about people who get it and the people that don't. And holy cow, I mean, I've been way more in the company of people that don't get it for most of my life. And so, I think we can afford some folks a little grace, particularly folks that have been raised in church. I mean, my gosh, but they're only doing and acting and thinking like we taught them to think as leaders and act and do. So, be a little patient with them, and be patient with yourself. You're going to screw up, and you're going to follow some leads that don't pan out, and you're going to think you're being helpful, and sometimes you're not, and but that's life. That's the great experience and the great experiment of it. So I would say just be patient, and then I would say face your fears. I think fear keeps us isolated and anxious and locked up. That we're afraid we're not going to know the right thing to do. We're not going to know the right thing to say. If I'm, or how to act, or I'm out of my lane, or whatever. There's 1,000 things that the enemy, the leader of the anti-life movement, who's the devil, and his kingdom, of anti-life, we're invading his kingdom. So of course he's going to, he's going to whisper fear into your soul, because if he can just paralyze you, then you're less of a threat. It's kind of like, I remember. So face those things. I remember our first year of marriage. Kathy and I hadn't been married very long. We lived in this duplex in East Texas, and we laid down to go sleep one night, cut the lights out, and then suddenly there's this ruckus in the closet, and there's all kind of Kathy, what is that? Now, of course, I don't know. So we cut the light on. We're convinced that there's some kind of monster in the closet. She runs to the other room. I grab the only weapon close by, which is my 9-iron, and which had not done much for me on the golf course. So, and I open the closet door, and suddenly I hear something coming up this sack that's in the corner, and I get ready for some creature to crawl up. And when it finally emerges, it's a bug with about 3,000 legs that's been scratching on this sack that made it sound like it was, the size of an armadillo in there. And of course, my adrenaline was racing so fast, I just beat the tar out of that carpet in my 9-iron. But no loss to my golf game. But the truth is, that's how the enemy. He sounds so big. He whispers. He wants us to think those are, we can't do this. It's going to be to this or to that, or and so those fears, I'm telling you, face those fears. Imagine them. Work yourself through it. What's the worst thing that can happen? Play the thing out. Give yourself permission to do that, because what happens is you're going to find that those fears will melt as you face them. I'm not saying you will not be fearful, but that puts you in a position then to receive the power that only God can give you, and the strength and the courage to face your fear and to move in spite of fear. Courage is not fearless. It's to move in spite of. You still carry the fear with you, but you're able to allow the Spirit to deal with it. So face those fears. Realize it's normal, but then go and watch God be the victor, and watch him vanquish your fears, and trust me, that'll make you a much more viral kingdom agent.
And I think just starting with naming the fears and recognizing that you are in fear is so important, and such a misstep in a lot of places. Recognizing I'm scared, I'm going to fail, I'm whatever it may be. It also helps you to pray and say, God, I'm feeling fearful, and please help me, conquer this.
Well, you're right. Naming it. You're exactly right. Because again, the devil wants us, it's this cacophonous roar. It's just, it's like kind of like Hogwarts, you hear something and it slithers around the corner, and so you go chasing after it, and about the time he gets there, it slithers around, because he doesn't want you to know exactly what it is, because once you can name that sucker, you can nail that sucker.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about what specific practices you would recommend for us to adopt that would help us become more engaged in the kingdom movement.
I really think praying with a kingdom mindset, it seems that sometimes we throw prayer out there as if like it's a coverall for what you don't, if you don't know what to do, just pray. I'm saying we don't know what to do because we're not praying. Mm-hmm. And I think, this is why Paul said pray without ceasing. And the only way you can pray without ceasing is not to be saying much. You've got to be listening. And that's what I think a kingdom prayer is. Help me see, Lord. Help me hear. Help me know what's going on. Put me in touch with what's really real here, not just what seems to be. here. I mean, I'm reminded of that Old Testament story, where the servant says, "We're at Elijah." Was it Elijah or Elisha? I can't remember. I should read the Old Testament. But and so he says, we're outnumbered. We don't have a chance. And the prophet asks the Lord just to reveal reality to this servant, and just pulls back the veil, and you see all the heavenly host available for the protection. I think kingdom praying lets us do that. I mean, as a matter of fact, when Jesus, that whole fig tree thing, the last week of his life, the miracle of that story is not that Jesus nukes a fig tree. Go read it again. That's not what the disciples are amazed at. They knew that this was a sick tree. It was dying. It didn't have fruit, and it wasn't even supposed to have leaves. I mean, it was totally out of round. All Jesus does is he fast forwards the future. That is when I say all that he does, that's the miracle of the story. He fast forwards the future. The tree's dying. He says, "You're not going to bear fruit again." And the disciples go, "Oh, how did the tree wither so quickly?" I'm quoting King Jimmy language again. In other words, how did you get that thing to die overnight or right in front of our eyes, rather than taking another year or so just to give it up? And then Jesus gives us teaching on prayer. Now, if you think Jesus nuking a fig tree is the big deal there, then the teaching on prayer doesn't make any sense. But if you think, the real miracle here is that Jesus fast forwards the future, then this teaching on prayer, where he says, if you can agree, you can say to this mountain, "Go throw yourself in the sea." Now you understand that prayer is a way, literally, of participating in fast forwarding the future, if you can agree with God on and see what he's up to. It's just a remarkable way of participating in some of that quantum spirituality that Hannah won't let me talk about. And that you're grateful for her presence even more. But we are operating from here to there. God's already been there. He's coming back to here. And in our praying, we can actually get there quicker.
Doesn't this kind of praying open you up for becoming dissatisfied with how a lot of things are keeping people from experiencing the life God intends?
Yes, and that's exactly what God intends. He wants us to be dissatisfied. I mean, this is the way the Spirit gets in and makes us, dissatisfied. It's one of the key practices or elements I see in kingdom leaders. They are not satisfied with the status quo. Whether it's, and particularly in their area where they're feeling the pain, if it's in literacy or homelessness or equity, economic equity or whatever. And so they just are not satisfied. And so that's exactly where God wants to get you, so that you're now willing to move and to do something about it, to ease your own pain in one regard. But you also get really good, if you're a kingdom leader, you get really good at helping other people get dissatisfied with the status quo. You have the savvy to know how to bring other people into that dissatisfaction, so that you can begin to build a coalition of the willing to tackle some problems and really move the needle on some key issues.
So, Reggie, you talk a lot about the importance of marrying vision and action, that the kingdom is about mission, not just message. What do you say to that, and how can people approach the mission in a way that doesn't make it seem so intimidating?
Well, I think, that whole thing about mission and action, I'm thinking about a friend of mine who runs this magnificent ministry in Dallas, multi-million-dollar industry. Started with just a clothes closet and food pantry, with 3 volunteers. It's now a $15 million a year deal, lots of employees, hundreds of volunteers. And one of their mantras is, fail fast. And, they're not content, and they're involved in everything. I mean, they're still doing food, they're still doing clothes, but they're doing job training. They're working with immigration laws. They are dealing with the homelessness issue. They've helped over 2,000 people move out. I mean, one of the things Larry likes to say is we've discovered that the cure for homelessness is to give people a home. I mean, what an idea. Who's ever thought of that before? Instead of just hosing them down, with food and a cot in some, give people a home. I mean, we know now that homelessness itself can cause mental problems. It's not the other way around. Sometimes throw me out on the street and it won't take long for me to be really challenged and imbalanced and begin to lose a grip on some realities. And so, helping, hundreds, literally over 2,000 folks already, that's because, excuse me, that's because he likes to move. He moves up, and he's done some things that he would tell you right off the bat have not worked. But the key is to fail fast. If you build a culture like that, then you're empowering people around you also to take risk, and also to to have a tolerance for failure. But the only failure we can't tolerate is not trying something. I mean, try to address what it is. So I think marrying vision and action is really critical. There was another part to that question that I can't recall right now.
How can people approach the mission in a way that doesn't make it seem so intimidating?
Well, I think good. I think you've got to find some folks to do it with. There are some of us that are great solo practitioners, and maybe we're the one person heroic, but I find there are far fewer people that fit that role. They're far more likely to have the courage and the resilience, the stamina to deal with whatever the issue is, if in fact they're part of a band of brothers or sisters or band of the committed, whoever it is. We're in this together and we're going to make a difference. I really think that is the biggest thing that I would say. Is find some folks to do it with. I would also say figure out, like you said earlier today, name the fear, get so that you can deal with that. I would also figure out what strengths you have that you bring to the table, so that you know the assets that you have, or what you might need to add to the assets that you have by way of recruitment. Then I would also figure out what you need to learn. I remember having a conversation with a woman in St. Louis who had been was successful in her business, but she told me she wanted to do social work and she was going back to school to learn how to do it. I mean, that's an obvious example, but in so many ways we can educate ourselves to the challenges. If it's homelessness, read up on it, figure out what are the causes of it, and what is it about gentrification that's in this part of town that's raising homeless. I mean, you can go to school and figure out what you don't know.
Do you have a couple other practices or pieces of advice for our listeners about how they can position themselves for greater kingdom impact?
Yeah, just a couple. I would say do whatever it is that you can do to keep curious and to stay curious. The greatest leaders I know are always learning. They're always leaning in. They're always looking and listening. And I mean, I would stay curious. And I'm around some leaders, when they're at dinner or whatever, they feel like they've got to be the life of the party and dominate the whole conversation. And we're just all there to hit. It's way more important, I think, to ask questions, figure out what's going on with the other people in the room. Or if it's reading, or if it's some kind of a field experience. I'll be with a group 2 days from now. We're doing a downtown urban kind of walkthrough just to get a sense for what are the things at street level. I mean, this comes down out of academia and all that. Let's just hit the streets here and let's see what's going on around here. I mean, those are the kinds of things I think that can keep you curious and keep your learning. And then I would say maybe a final piece is whatever it is you need to do to hang on to your optimism. Just keep reminding yourself. Now, it's going to be a pain-tinged optimism because you're not happy with the way things are. But be optimistic in the fact that you are a part of God's kingdom, which is winning. And, you do know what the final score is here. It can look like we're really way behind late in the fourth quarter, but, that's not reality. That's just the way the world wants you to see it. So remind yourself, be around people who inspire you, whatever it takes to maintain your optimism. Because when I see people, because a key strategy of the enemy is to discourage you, even to make you cynical. And when I deal with discouraged people all the time, and I can help them. By the way, when someone crosses over into cynicism, I just feel like they have really just become a toxic agent, and it's very difficult. So fight like crazy to keep from going there. Be around some people, remind yourselves of things, quote scripture, whatever you have to, listen to great music, be in touch with some lovely people, spend some time with a kid, I mean a real young kid, whatever it takes to maintain your optimism.
Well, thank you, Reggie, for giving us some practical advice on how each of us can increase our kingdom influence. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. And stay tuned for the next series of the Reggie McNeil podcast.